missed me, Bambi. His blood freezing in his veins. Those 3 words. They twisted and coiled around him, suffocating, pulling at him back to the memories he tried hard to bury. Bambi. But it was a name he hadn't heard in so long, a name only one person ever dared to call him. His heart beat out of rhythm, each thud a grim reminder of everything he tried to escape. One of the reasons why he left his hometown. He never escaped from them, it was still there, he was being watched, his every step was being watched, the sound of cup breaking pulled him back from his wilding thoughts. He snapped his head up, and there she was, YN. Her mouth was open slightly, the color drained from her face, as she stared at the blood-stained cloth lying beside box. YN, he said, hastily threw the cloth back into the box. He slammed the lid shut and walked towards her. It's not what it looks like. But she took a step back. What is that? He swallowed. It's just something I found here this morning. Someone left it, even to him it sounded unbelievable. Be blood, Jungkook. There's blood. I know, he rubbed his temple. Let's go to your house.
Yeah.
It took every inch of him to calm himself down. As they ate breakfast together. You should report this to the police, she said, breaking the tense silence. No, the word left his mouth instantly, a knee-jerk reaction that surprised even him. He looked at her, catching the confusion in her eyes. But why not? Someone broke into your house, Jungkook. They left blood, note. You can't just ignore that. You shouldn't let it go. I don't want to get the police involved. He didn't know how to explain it. The thought of detectives poking around in his past, asking questions he didn't want to answer, he wasn't ready for it. He didn't even know if he ever would be. What if they try to hurt you, thought. They won't. He sounded sure. For years, they played their twisted games, their strange mind games, but they'd never actually hurt him. At least, not physically. He didn't want to say it out loud, but he felt like the person behind those notes, they wanted him to feel something, to remind him of something. Not to hurt him. Well, it's your decision, of course. But you should be careful. People like that, they don't stop until they get what they want. And you have no idea what they really want, do you? Maybe I have slightest idea what they want. He mumbled and he didn't get further response, busy in his own thoughts that he missed the pair of eyes watching him from a distant, lips curved into a small, knowing smile, one that he missed entirely. A smile that held more than concern. It held satisfaction. Jungkook scrolls through his phone, his face tight. Earlier in the evening, he got a call from Jake, an old high school friend. Jake told him the news, one of their classmates, Rhea, had been killed. Jungkook finally remembers her face, the same girl who approached him at the party last night. The internet is flooded with articles about her murder, but most of the pictures are blurred for the public. Yet, he have those raw pictures. He received those uncensored version of it from unknown number. BL00D, her lifeless B0DY, it's burned into his brain now. The sight makes his stomach twist painfully. Without a second thought, he blocks the number, his fingers moving faster than they ever have. Why now? Now, it's like the darkness is back, clawing at his peace, pulling him under. He shakes his head, trying to push the thoughts away, but they stick, stubborn and haunting. The doorbell rings, snapping him out of his trance. He frowns. He isn't in the mood for visitors. Not today. The bell rings again, followed by a voice. Guk. Open the door. YN. He sighs heavily, dragging himself to the door. When he opens it, there she is, standing with her arms full of bags and a bright smile. Help me, she says, looking like she's about to drop everything. He took the bags from her hands, stepping aside so she can walk in. What is all this? She grins. You were upset today, because of everything. So, I thought I'd cheer you up. He stares at her, slightly stunned. She starts pulling things out of the bags, snacks, drinks, even a small cake. YN, you didn't have to. Don't start. Just sit down. I'm going to make us something to eat. We will watch movie together, and you're going to feel better. That's final. He blinked, debating for a second before nodding. Sure. Why not? Anything to distract him from those haunting images. The fresh blood. They both settled on the couch. YN grabbed the remote to select the movie. She chose a mystery thriller, one about a string of murders. He scoffed silently. Great, more death. But he didn't object. She looked so focused, but watching the movie, that he let it slide. He leaned back on the sofa, trying to relax. The movie begins, and for the first 10 minutes, Jungkook tries to follow it. His mind is a maze of twisted thoughts. Why now? Why after all this time? He thought it was over, thought he had left all the darkness back in Busan. He even convinced himself that it wasn't personal, just a random stalker with a sick obsession. But this? The blood-soaked clothes, the note, and now Rhea's brutal death, it's personal. His fingers curl into fists, resting against his thighs. His eyes drift to YN. She sat close to him, closer than most people ever dared. Normally, this would annoy him. He hated people invading his personal space. But YN? He didn't mind. If anything, her presence felt calming, though he wasn't sure why. A part of him wants to push YN away too. What if they target her next? God, what his life has come to. His gaze stayed on her, observing every inch of her face. Her small frame curled into the sofa, her hands gripping the edge of the blanket she pulled over her legs. The way her lips pursed slightly when she focused. The soft curve of her jaw when the light from the TV hit her face. She wasn't wearing her glasses. He didn't see any contacts either. Her bare eyes were sharp and soft at the same time. Her irises were a deep, enigmatic shade. Not just brown, but layered, as if every tone of gold and chestnut poured together to create something uniquely hers. It felt familiar. They weren't just eyes you glanced at and forgot. Her lashes rested softly against her skin as she blinked slowly, lost in thought as the movie played on. She looked so natural. Why is she even doing this? Taking care of him? Why does she care so much about him? Because he's not some saint who deserves this kindness. His life is messy, chaotic. If she knew half the things that haunted him, she'd probably run. Why are you staring at me like that? He blinks, startled. She's turned toward him now, her head tilted slightly, curious eyes fixed on him. Nothing, he mumbled quickly, looking away. She didn't say anything, just smiled softly before turning back to the screen. By the time the movie ended and the credits rolled, YN was already asleep, her head resting against Jungkook's shoulder. His arm was numb, the pins and needles sensation spreading all over him, but he didn't move right away. He glanced down at her peaceful face, her breath soft and steady, her lips slightly parted as she slept. He sighed, tapping her shoulder gently. YN. But instead of waking, she snuggled closer, pressing her cheek further into his arm. He froze, unsure of what to do. He wasn't exactly used to this, someone being this comfortable around him. After a moment of hesitation, he decided it was better not to wake her. With one arm, he supported her weight as he slid out from under her. Slowly, he laid her down on the sofa, her body sinking into the cushions. Jungkook grabbed the nearest blanket and draped it over her, tucking it around her to make sure she stayed warm. Sleep well, nerd, he whispered under his breath, taking off her glasses. He shook his head at how soft he was being, dragging himself to his room. He barely had the energy to change. He collapsed onto his bed, the day's events weighing heavy on his mind. But the second his head hit the pillow, his eyes shut, and he drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep. It was deep into the night when the creak of his bedroom door broke the silence. The faint glow from the streetlights outside illuminated the room just enough to make out a shadow slipping inside. The bed dipped as another weight settled beside him. Cold fingers reached out, tracing his features. Fingertips brushed over his closed eyelids, his sharp nose, the curve of his lips. He mumbled something in his sleep, turning slightly, but the fingers froze, hovering over his face. When he stilled again, they continued their exploration, trailing down to his jawline and brushing against the faint stubble, their gaze burning on him. It was as if they were memorizing every detail, every imperfection, and every line. Dawn broke and the first rays of light peeked through the curtains. They figured out still didn't move an inch from their place. Watching him. It wasn't a passing whim, it was a ritual, their favorite thing. Every night, they would sit like this, in the dark stillness of his room, savoring the rise and fall of his chest. This was their moment, the one time they could be close to him without fear of being caught. Mine, the words left the person's mouth so softly, it was barely a breath. Jungkook's been ignoring YN for days now. Ever since that night, the night she had thought she was helping him, comforting him, he's been distant, cold. Like she did something wrong. She kept thinking back, replaying every moment after the movie night. Was it the breakfast? The way she brought up the blood? No, she was careful, wasn't she? She didn't push him. She would never. All she wanted was to cheer him up, to make him smile like he used to. But now he won't even let me near him. It stings. More than it should. The holidays are going to start from tomorrow, 2 whole weeks of no classes, and she thought maybe they'd spend some of it together. But he's avoiding her, and she don't know why. Walking through campus today, her steps feel heavier than usual. The quiet is louder without him around. She got used to his presence in a month, that everything feels bore now. She keeps staring at her phone, hoping for a message. But there's nothing. She take a turn near the library when voices stop her in her tracks. Familiar, unpleasant voices. Her bullies. She keep my head down, pretending not to notice them, but their conversation makes her freeze. I'm telling you, he's not as clean as he looks, one of them says, Jungkook. That guy's a ticking time bomb. I still don't get how he walked away from that Ryan situation. If it were anyone else, they'd be rotting in a cell. Right? Almost killed the guy, and now he's out here acting all nonchalant. Makes me sick. She stayed perfectly still, her ears sharp as she let their words sink in. Ryan had it coming, he kept provoking him, calling his mother names, someone else said. Maybe, but still. Jungkook is dangerous, man. You don't just walk away from something like that without connections. Bet he's hiding more than we know. The first one laughs, a harsh sound that makes her skin crawl. Wouldn't surprise me if he snaps again. She slowly turned her head, her eyes narrowing as she scanned their faces. Their smug expressions, their careless laughter, they don't deserve to say his name. Dangerous? Jungkook? Well, they were right. He is dangerous. But they don't know him. They don't see what she see. They don't know how he takes his coffee, how he leans back when he laughs, how his gaze softens, but most of all, they don't know how wrong they are. Her fingers curl into fists at her sides, but she keep her face calm. They don't deserve to talk about him. Not him. She turn away before they notice her, steps quick and silent, she walk in the opposite direction. If Jungkook ever hurt someone, there must be a reason. Most importantly, the other one would be at fault. Definitely. If you poke a bear, you can't cry when it bites back. She bite her lip, forcing herself to focus. If Jungkook won't talk to her, fine. She'll give him time. But those idiots? They have no idea what's coming for them. YN stops dead in her tracks, her heart skipping a beat as she spots Jungkook leaning casually against the wall outside her house, scrolling through his phone. For a second, she blinks, thinking she's imagining him. But no, he's there. His hair is slightly messy, and he looks tired, but still, perfect. Something unfamiliar blooms in her chest, relief, happiness. She hasn't seen him in days, and now he's just there. Jungkook glances up when her footsteps approach, his sharp gaze softening. Hi. Hi, her voice betraying a little too much enthusiasm. She clears her throat, trying to mask it. There's a brief awkward and unfamiliar silence. Jungkook shifts his weight against the wall, slipping his phone into his pocket. Did you need something? No, not really. He rubs the back of his neck, looking anywhere but at her. Haven't seen you around. Her lips twitch upward slightly. You were the one ignoring me. He winces, caught in red light. I wasn't ignoring you. Oh, really? Yen folds her arms, cocking her head. So, suddenly forgetting that we're neighbors isn't ignoring? Not replying to my texted. Okay, maybe I was, keeping my distance. But it's not what you think. And what do I think? I just needed some time to sort things out. Just wanted to be alone for a while. She studies him for a moment. You could have said at least replied to my messages. I was worried. That seems to catch his attention. He lifts his head, his dark eyes locking onto hers. There's a flicker of something in them, guilt? But before she could make something out of it, he straightens, taking a step closer towards her. Oh, he says, his tone suddenly low. Yen blinks, the sudden shift in the air between them catching her off guard. Why?
Yeah.
Another step. Her back meets the door with a soft thud, and she realizes too late that she's been retreating. He is standing too close now, his scent, something warm and woodsy, filling her senses. Her favorite scent. You were worried about me? His low voice was enough to make her stomach flip. She swallows hard, trying to keep her thoughts straight, but his proximity is making it impossible. Why you didn't answer, Anne? He leans down slightly, his face so close now that she can feel the warmth of his breath against her cheek. His eyes flicker down to her lips for the briefest moment before meeting her gaze again. Relax, his soft voice almost felt like purr. I'm fine. See? And the words just stuck somewhere in her throat. She's suddenly hyper-aware of every single thing about him, the way his jaw clenches, the way his lips curve into the faintest smirk, the way his hand comes up, resting on the doorframe beside her head, trapping her completely. Hot, oh okay, whoa what a response Yen. His gaze dropping to her lips once more before returning to her eyes. You're stuttering. And no, I'm not, she lies, her face heating up. He chuckles softly, the sound vibrating between them. She could feel it inside her. That was impossible. Sure you aren't. Then, as suddenly as he closed the distance, he steps back, the warmth of his presence disappearing just as quickly as it overwhelmed her. She almost let out a whine. Get a grip Yen. Do you want to come in? Depends, he said, quirking a brow at her. Will you make something for me? Do I look like your personal chef? He chuckled. No, but you'd still make something for me if I asked nicely, wouldn't you? She rolled her eyes. You sound confident. Oh, come on, he pressed. You were worried about me, weren't you? Isn't that what you said 2 seconds ago? She felt her face flush even more, and she turned on her heel, opening the door and stepping inside without waiting for him to follow. Later Yen cooked spaghetti with a creamy garlic sauce and grilled chicken on the side. The pot was on low heat. His stomach was already rumbling. He got the perfect neighbor, even without telling her the things he loved, she would make it for him. At least now he don't have to eat junk food. She told him she will come back after taking a quick shower. He didn't mind, her expression from earlier were doing something to him. Her parted lips, her wide eyes, the way she stutters. It was doing strange things to him. His phone buzzed in his hand, pulling him from his thoughts. Before it goes too far. He glanced at the screen, expecting a random notification. Instead, the color from his face evaporated. Getting too cozy with nerdy? I see. The message was from an unknown number. He sat up instantly, his fingers tightening around the phone. His eyes darted toward the bathroom door, where the sound of the shower still running. What the hell? His fingers tighten around the phone, knuckles turning white. With a shaky breath, finding his courage, he quickly types a response. What the F and £K do you want? His pulse races as he stares at the screen, waiting for a reply. The seconds stretch long and heavy. The phone vibrates again, and he almost jumps. Careful. You wouldn't want the little nerd to get caught in the crossfire, would you? His chest tightens. A fresh wave of anger surges through him, replacing the icy fear that gripped him. He feels a protective instinct flare inside, burning hot and raw. Now that person it is, they're targeting YN now, and that's crossing a line he won't tolerate. His jaw clenches as he types furiously. I dare you to hurt anyone close to me. You'll see the worst of me. He presses send, his breathing uneven. His thumb hovers over the screen, but waiting, daring them to respond. The phone buzzes again. This time, the reply makes his stomach churn. Oh, I'm counting on it, Bambi. Be careful. His grip tightens on the phone, and his teeth grind together. Just as he's about to throw the phone across the room in frustration, a blood-curdling scream that tears through the air. YN. He freezes, his mind and brain paralyzed for a second. Then, like a switch flipping, he's on his feet, his phone forgotten as it clatters to the floor. YN, he yells, fear gripping his voice. He pushes the door open, but it's empty. His heart pounds as he hears muffled sounds coming from the bathroom. YN, he shouts again, slamming into the bathroom door with his shoulder. It doesn't budge. He throws his weight against it again, the wood cracking under the force. Finally, the door gives way, swinging open. The scene in front of him steals the breath from his lungs. YN is on the tiled floor, clutching her leg, her face twisted in pain. Water from the shower sprays everywhere, mixing with the crimson streak running down her shin. A shattered glass shampoo bottle lies beside her, shards scattered across the floor. His heart lurches as he drops to his knees beside her, his hands hovering over her trembling form. What the hell happened? Are you okay? I slipped, she stammers, voice trembling in pain. I think I twisted my ankle. Relief floods him like a crashing wave, but it's quickly followed by guilt for assuming something far worse. He lets out a shaky breath, running a hand through his hair as he stares at the blood. Why the hell were you screaming like that? It hurt, okay, she snaps, tears pooling in her eyes. Okay, I'm sorry. He gently places a hand on her shoulder. Can you move? She shakes her head, wincing. I don't think so. Carefully, he picks up a towel and drapes it over her, shielding her from the chill in the air. I'm going to get you out of here. But I need to check your leg first, okay? She nods hesitantly, biting her lip to keep from making a sound as he gently lifts her leg. His brows knit together as he inspects the swelling around her ankle. There's no obvious fracture, but the bruising looks nasty. His eyes flicker to the gash on her shin, blood oozing sluggishly from the wound. This is going to sting, he warns as he grabs another towel from the rack. She doesn't respond, only watches him through glassy eyes as he carefully wipes the blood away, revealing the shallow cut beneath. You're lucky it's not deep, he murmurs, more to himself than to her. I don't feel lucky, . Yeah, I can see that. But thankfully no glass pierced in your skin, he said looking at the wound. Satisfied that the bleeding has slowed, he sets the towel aside and slips an arm under her knees and another behind her back. Wait, what are you doing? Her eyes widened. Getting you out of here before you hurt yourself even more. Without giving her a chance to protest, he lifts her effortlessly. She gasps, her hands, clutching his shirt for balance. Her cheek brushes against his chest, and she can feel the steady thrum of his heartbeat. You're heavier than you look, he teases. YN scowls, no one told you to carry me. Mind if I remind? You can't walk, he raised an eyebrow. I would have managed, she rolled her eyes. Then I should drop you. You can manage on your own, he said lowering her a little, and she gasped, tightening her hold on his collar. Don't you dare. Or I'll bite. He snorted, is that a threat or are you trying to flirt? She glared at him as he sets her down gently on the bed, propping her up with pillows before crouching in front of her. Stay here. I'm getting the first aid kit. He returns after a few seconds, he's holding a small kit and a bag of ice wrapped up in a dish towel. this is going to hurt, he warns again, sitting on the edge of the bed as he presses the ice against her swollen ankle. He works on cleaning and bandaging the cut on her shin. How did you even slipped? It was stupid. I wasn't paying attention, thought. Well, you should rest now. Keep the ice on for another 20 minutes. Yan leans back against the headboard, watching him as he stands. Are you leaving?
Yeah.
You could stay, you know. Oh, okay. Then I'll be in the living room. Thank you, she said when he reached for the handle. He nodded his head and the door clicks shut behind him. He exhales heavily. He fishes his phone from his pocket. He unlocks his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen as he composes a message. Let's end this game of hide and seek. With a sharp breath, he presses send. The screen flashes briefly before the message disappears, and he waits. Tick. 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 Minutes pass, no reply. His knee bounces as tension coils in his chest. Still nothing. Coward, he mutters, tossing the phone onto the coffee table. But just as the word leaves his lips, his phone buzzes. His heart leaps to his throat as he snatches it up, unlocking the screen with quick fingers. So eager to meet me, Bambi? Let's meet, then. A second message follows almost immediately. Where it all began. You remember, don't you? Midnight. Don't keep me waiting. Chills. That's what Jungkook felt the moment step in Busan. The cold air wrapped around him, pressing into his chest like a warning. Leaving his hometown he vowed never to return. Yet here he was. The city where he laughed, cried, and grown. But it was also the city that haunted him. With each step he took, his nerves felt raw, like they were being scraped by the invisible claws. It was hauntingly quiet. Only the crickets singing their own songs. His hands were buried deep in his jacket pockets, his fingers curled into fists as he shivered against the cold. And he knew it was not the chill that made him tremble. He took a deep breath, his eyes narrowing as he entered that alley, the alley he swore he'd never walk down again. It was darker than he remembered. And the broken street light hanging. It's been 8 years and yet everything is same. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to turn back, to run to the safety of his apartment in Seoul, to bury himself under warm blankets and pretend this place didn't exist. Yet his legs just taking steps on their own. He reached the spot and came to it at stop, his breath clouding in the cold air. His pulse pounded in his ears as his eyes scanned the ground, the walls. Nothing changed. Jungkook let out a shaky sigh, closing his eyes. Took you long enough. The voice sliced through the silence like a knife through flesh, low, mocking, and chillingly familiar. His entire body felt like it plunged into icy water, the freezing chill spreading through his veins. His hand slipped under his jacket. His fingers wrapped around the hilt of kinfi, gripping it tightly, then came the laugh, soft, almost melodic. Addicting. Are you going to kill me with that knife, Bambi? The nickname rolled off their tongue like honey, but it felt like curse to him. He clenched his jaw. No, he wasn't going to let her see him weak again. Slowly, he turned around. But nothing could have prepared him for what he saw. His breath left him in a sharp, startled gasp. His legs almost gave out beneath him, and he took an involuntary step back, colliding with the wall behind him. It was her. The sweet, shy, quiet, nerd girl who always seemed to fumble over her words when he was near. The one who brought him food, who smiled at him with warmth, who watched movies with him on lazy evenings. But the girl standing before him now wasn't the one he knew. She stood there under the flickering light, her head tilted slightly, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips, and her eyes, God, her eyes, were dark and empty, void of anything resembling the kindness he once saw in them. Now realizing why they felt familiar. This isn't funny. This had to be some kind of sick joke. A prank. Anything but this, never said it was, her smile widening in a way that sent chills down his spine. It wasn't warm or inviting, it was sinister. He just stood there, frozen, his body refusing to obey him. Paralyzed. How was this happening? He searched her face for any sign of the girl he thought that he knew, the one who lived next door, who lent him books, made him breakfast and shared sweet smiles. Never, not even in his wildest dreams, or worse nightmares, did he think this would be her real face. What a fool he was. What a blind, naive fool not to see through the act, to see the truth that now stared back at him with haunting clarity. The girl he was slowly falling in love with. The girl whose presence made him feel at home in a way nothing else ever did. She was the reason behind the nightmares that chased him for years. Why, he demanded, his voice now stable, sharp. The fear that gripped him moments ago was now slowly replacing with anger. Because the day I saw you, bleeding and helpless, I vowed to protect you, and I did. Protect me? He snapped. The familiar rage started to consume him. You called this protection? You killed people around me. They hurt you, Bambi, she said simply, as if that answered everything. But it doesn't mean they deserve to die, he glared at her. They did. They deserved it. Every single one of them. No, they don't. He took a step forward. Why did you kill Mina? Yn scrunched her nose. Now who's that? His steps faltered, her casual tone knocking the wind out of him. What? You'll have to be more specific, Bambi, she said, crossing her arms over her chest. I've dealt with so many pests for you, it's hard to keep track. The blood drained from his face. Mina. The girl from my school, she. Oh, her, she said, her expression lighting up like she finally remembered. She lied about you, didn't she? Told everyone you cheated on exams after you rejected her? Spread rumors that made everyone turn against you. She deserved it. You killed Jake. He bullied you every day. Called you names, humiliated you in front of everyone. And Hyun? He was my friend. He betrayed you, she hissed, her eyes narrowing at him. He laughed behind your back. Told everyone your secrets like you were a joke. His head spun as the names of the dead piled in his mind. They didn't deserve to die for that. Yn rolled her eyes. You're so forgiving, Bambi. It's kind of cute, but also, so naive, but I'm not. They touch what's mine, they get killed. Simple. I'm not yours, he spat, the familiar rage taking over him. You're sick to even think I'd ever see you as my savior after all the things you've done. Her smirk didn't falter at his sharp words. If anything, it grew wider, darker. She hummed, taking a slow step closer to him, her gaze locking onto his like a predator circling its prey. Are you a saint, Gucky? The use of that twisted nickname always made his stomach churn, but he couldn't look away from her. Or have you forgotten? She asked, voice dropping to a near whisper, the menace on her tone becoming more and more clear. Forgotten the way you enjoyed it. Don't, he warned sharply, his voice shaky, weak against the storm she was conjuring. She batted her eyelashes. What are you trying so hard to forget? She murmured. Leaning closer as her lips brushed against his ear, don't you remember the thrill of it, the rush that made your heart race, made you feel alive for the first time? Stop, he didn't want to remember it again. Why? Because you will remember the way you felt powerful that time? That you enjoyed when you plunged my knife into that man's chest over and over again? When you bathed your hands in his warm blood while his screams, oh, they filled the air, didn't they? Like music to your ears. Shut up. Jungkook snapped, his voice sharp and loud enough to echo. His fists were clenched so tightly at his sides that his knuckles turned white. You don't know anything. Don't I? She said mockingly, sweetly. Oh, Gucky, I was there. I saw the way you looked at him, at the man who dared to touch you. I saw the rage in your eyes, the way that you didn't stop even when he begged for mercy. That was you, not me. His chest heaved, breaths coming too fast, too shallow. Pathetic, helpless you were, crying for someone to save you that night. That was it. Something inside him snapped. I said shut the F#K up, he growled, almost unrecognizable even to himself. Yan let out a choked laugh, her head snapping back against the wall as his hand wrapped around her throat. Her smile remained intact, even as her air supply grew thin. Instead, it widened, a sick, that twisted satisfaction glinting in her eyes. That's it, she rasped, her voice taunting and full of glee. There's my Bambi. His grip tightened in her delicate neck, his breathing ragged as his anger completely taking over him. She gasped, but it wasn't fear in her expression, it was amusement. She tilted her head slightly, as much as his grip would allow, her dark eyes boring into his. Look at you, she wheezed, still smiling. So full of rage. So alive. His fingers twitched against her neck, and for a fleeting second, he saw the terror in her eyes from that night. But it wasn't hers, it was his own, reflected in the memory out of that man's face. And then, he remembered her. The girl his age, skinny, but emotionless eyes. She drew the blood from his thigh, knocking the old man from his body. He's all yours now. Do what you want with him, she said, throwing knife at his feet. He stared at the knife. The first time in his life he saw the blood gushing out like fountain. He didn't remember grabbing the knife. He didn't remember the first strike. But he remembered the rush. The sheer, uncontrollable rage that consumed him as he drove the blade into the man's flesh. Over and over, until his arms ached and his vision blurred with tears. He killed that man. But it was the first time in his 13 years of life he lost control of himself completely. He regretted that night every single day since, or at least he told himself he did. He wanted to regret it, to hate that part of himself. But she was right. He enjoyed it, just for a moment. The raw power, the feeling of dominance, of being untouchable, it was intoxicating. And that disgusted him more than anything else. Go ahead. Do it. You've wanted to for so long, haven't you? Let it out. Prove me right. Her voice snapped him back. This wasn't him. This wasn't who he wanted to be, F#K, he growled, shoving her back into the wall one last time before releasing her. He staggered back, his chest heaving, his hands trembling as he looked at her and then at his own fingers, the same ones that gripped her so tightly moments ago. A wave of disgust washed over him at himself. You can deny it all you want, Bambi. But you can't outrun yourself forever. This is who you are, who you've always been. Just embrace it. And Jungkook didn't want to hear another word from her mouth. So he quickened his steps, running until his vision blurred with tears, until his lungs burned. This is who you are. You've always been this way. Just embrace it. He didn't stop running until his legs gave out beneath him. He didn't want to accept it. He didn't want to believe that what she said was true. Because that's the lie he fed himself every night.